Hi, my name is Andrew Seaton, and you're listening to the Us People podcast with Savia Rocks.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Us People podcast. I'm your host Savia Rocks, and today I'm humbled enough to have Andrew, who's a book author, and the book is called Spiritual Awakening Made Simple. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the Us People podcast. How are you?
I'm great, thanks Savia, and thanks for having me on the show.
No, you're welcome. Thank you so much for emailing me and sending this book over to me for me to read. It's been a beautiful journey within the book. Like I said to you before, I literally read it every time I'm in the middle of or the end of a podcast and I'm hoping to finish it soon, which is really cool. But when I was reading the book, there are so many things, so many questions that I do have about it. But the first question that I would like to ask you is, tell me a little bit about where you grew up and your influence and what made you decide to write this book.
Well, that's a really interesting question in this sense, that one of the things that I would like your listeners to understand is that there's nothing in my background that has made it any easier for me to what I've described as wake up spiritually, that is to see through things that I previously thought were me and were true about the world, and to see that they're not actually true, that there's a deeper reality. What I want your listeners to understand is that there's nothing in my background that prepared me, makes it more likely for me to be able to experience that than they are. Yeah. So, I'm Australian. I grew up in Canberra, the capital city of Australia. But, and I've lived in different parts of Australia through my life so far. But for most of my life, certainly all of my adult life, I've had a sense that there's more to all this and more to me than is appearing on the surface, or there's more there than I can somehow grab hold of.
Yeah, I agree.
And so most of my adult life has been a search for what is this other reality that seems to be out there, and yet where is it and what is it? And, and so a lot of the work that I did, which was mostly in education, teaching initially, and then I delved really deeply into education and what really makes sense as a way of understanding how do you educate a human being to really flower completely, to really blossom in more than just our cognitive functions. How do you educate a person to become whole and fully bloomed? So, in my professional work, I was investigating this, and in my personal life, with all sorts of ups and downs that most people experience, relationship challenges, personal challenges, emotional challenges from time to time, financial challenges, all sorts of things. And yet in my personal life all the time, I was also exploring what's real. Who am I and what's really makes sense here, And so these two things were interweaving my formal investigations into what is a human being and how do we function and how could we function? Not just let's look at what's usual, but what's possible. What do we see certain rare individuals displaying in terms of more fully being awake to the faculties that are inherent in being a human being. So in my personal life, I was investigating this. I looked at all sorts of, alternative healing modalities, various spiritual practices, various philosophies, reading this and that and the other, and in my professional life, eventually doing a lot of formal study into what do we really understand about how human beings function, and how does that match up with how we see most institutions dealing with human beings, institutions like educational institutions, the schooling system. Is there a reasonable match between how we educate a human being and what we understand about how a human being can function and the kind of conditions that would support that fuller functioning? And I found there's a very poor match between how we, inverted commas, educate children, how we educate human beings. There's a poor match between that and what we really understand already quite well about how human beings function well, what conditions would support their functioning well, and what is the landscape of that more full functioning.
Yeah. How do you feel that?
So, eventually, yes, let's just
No. I
go
totally.
with what you wanted to ask.
How do you feel that we as education can intertwine them and make them better and teach them? Do you think there's a way for us to teach also spirituality or awakening within schools or education? Or do you feel like they don't do it for a reason? It's a complicated question, to be quite honest with you. But I just thought I would ask you.
Well, it's interesting that you've asked me, and I feel actually something going on inside about how you've asked me this.
Yeah.
Because I did eventually come to do study into a phrase that was bandied around a fair bit about 15, 20 years ago, which was because it was largely triggered by internet and technology and so forth, and people were starting to ask in the education world, what does this mean then about how we educate children? And are we going to be experiencing some kind of change in the paradigm of education? The fundamental ways that we understand a person and the activities that we engage them in to educate them. And I found that, yes, indeed, it does make sense to talk about a quite different paradigm for educating human beings. And I have written a bit about it.
Yeah.
I wrote a book actually about 10 years ago, which I self-published, but partly because I didn't know the least thing about marketing a book, but also partly because I just somehow didn't feel the time was right. And in a way, I wrote that book more for me than I did for the audience. And I think I needed to write this current book, which is just about to be released, Spiritual Awakening Made Simple, before I go back. And you're the second person who's recently prompted me to start thinking in terms of, I think this is my next book, to write about the education of a child. And it will be primarily a book for parents, for mums and dads.
That sounds
Maybe
good.
in many cases, especially mums, and many dads too, but in many cases it'll be mums who will want to read this book. And I'll be hoping that they read, first of all, Spiritual Awakening Made Simple, and then read the book that I write about how they can contribute to raising a child who is spiritually awake. Now, I want to just touch on some words that were part of your question, if I can just extract them back from my memory. You were asking the question, would it be possible in schools, for example, to teach spirituality in a way that, in some way would match what I've written about in my book, Spiritual Awakening Made Simple?
Yeah.
The short answer is no. No, it wouldn't be possible. for all sorts of reasons, some of which I'll address in this book that I want to write about education. The nature of schooling, and you may have noticed a couple of times in Spiritual Awakening Made Simple, I've made a little bit of a reference to
I saw that,
to the school system and to the kind of subtle but very powerful indirect effects that the experience of schooling has on children. And it's partly the nature of the beast. It's the institution of schooling which is not capable of giving a child the kinds of experiences and relationships and conditions that are going to be most conducive to their awakening all of their faculties and reawakening in it, really, their sense of their own beingness. And when I want to just address, you haven't really asked me the question, but I want to address what I called my book Spiritual Awakening. It's got to do with how do you become more aware of beliefs about spirit or about God?
That's my next question.
No. Yeah. I felt when I wrote this book, I initially I gave it a working title that was different. And then I felt, no, it has to be called Spiritual Awakening Made Simple. And I knew it was a twin-edged sword because many people will say, well, spirituality, I'm not really into it. You know, there's so many beliefs and there's so much argument about spiritual beliefs and things, and I really just don't want to go there. But I want to say to anybody listening to your program, Spiritual Awakening Made Simple is not about beliefs. In fact, there's a lot in the book about how to question beliefs and see that there's no way that we can know that the things that we commonly believe to be true are true. No, spiritual, I say spiritual awakening, I use the term in the book to refer to who we are that's more subtle than our thoughts and our body. It's in this sense that the essential dimension to who we are is spiritual, in the sense only that it's formless. It's awareness, it's our beingness, it's our awake presence, not the contents of our mind, but the awakeness that's behind our mind. So spiritual awakening is not about becoming more aware of religious concepts. It's about how to see through the things that we mistakenly identify as being who we are and as being the reality of the world around us, to discover what's behind that, which is the reality of who we are, the wakeful presence, the life essence that is who we truly are, and the life essence which is what this all manifested creation truly is, something more subtle than what we can perceive and manipulate on the surface. So the challenge of educating a human being, a human child, to become, and even there I hesitate to use the word become, because human children, more than most human adults, already have a lot of this sense, this more subtle sense of the spiritual reality of life. And so part of our challenge in raising children is to minimize how much we cause them to lose that sense. So it's a double challenge, how to avoid them losing their sense of their own beingness, and also how to the extent that they have, and it is inevitable in becoming a human being and living in this world of form and change, that we lose touch with the essence of who we are and we become identified with the manifested creation that we're living in. We become identified with I've got a body. I need to feed it. So then I need to think in terms of relationships and how can I get the things that I need to survive as a physical being. And so we learn a whole lot of ways of thinking about ourselves and the world. We think that's who we are. That's a mistake. It's inevitable. And so our opportunity really is to continue to live in the world of form without making the mistake that that's the ultimate reality, and without making the mistake that my body and my thoughts about who I am are who I am. They're not who I am. And so this is the exciting challenge then in terms of raising children, how to help them to hang on to that sense that most of them already have quite strongly, and try not to contribute to them losing it, and also school them, or not school them, I can't use that word, educate them in such a way that they learn how to grapple with, and participate in this world. Yes, of course, we need to show them how to do that to some extent, give them opportunities for participating in the world, but in such a way that they become effective in the world without being identified with the world, without thinking that they are and that the world is only or mainly this material manifestation.
That's a really good answer. It makes me question some of my ways of thinking when it comes to spirituality. Because I believe I am a very spiritual person, and I connect through energy with people, and that makes me evolve as a person. But I wish that I learnt this at a younger age. Everybody has a different direction in life, and we all know that if you feel like you are different, 9 times out of 10 most probably is because you are. We are all unique human beings. But for you, Andrew, the question that I do want to ask you is, how was your spiritual journey? Because when I was reading in your book, there was a part where you said that you had a few dreams. And one of them in particular, you was in a theatre, I do believe, and you heard voices. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I wanted to go more on that aspect of things and what that done to you and how it made you feel.
Yes. Thank you. Well, what I want to emphasize for your listeners is that I don't think of myself as a spiritual person.
Okay.
I experience myself as something more subtle than the world of form and the world of concepts. So I really want to emphasize this aspect that for me, and in my book, Spiritual Awakening Made Simple, it's about a way of experiencing. Even there's a difficulty, because when you think about experiencing something, there's you, and over here is the thing that you experience, or the idea that you experience. I'm here, the perceiver, and I'm perceiving this thought. But spirituality is about the perceiver. It's about the awakeness. It's about getting more in touch with who I am as being this peace-filled, aware presence. So a lot of people in recent times have been talking about becoming more present in the moment.
Yeah.
And this feeling, it's not a perception of something other than me. It's an aware presence in the moment. It's a wakefulness it's like an awareness, but not what I'm aware of, but being aware. It's the formless aspect of the awareness, and that's my nature. And when I just, to use some strange kind of words, when I kind of drop into that quietness of being aware presence, that's my spiritual nature. But the word, in a way, can get in the way because I'm now here beyond concepts. So words are cumbersome things, and you'll remember that I've said several times in the book, loosen the grip of your mind when you read this book, and don't hold the ideas too tightly.
I remember that
because
part.
The book is really not something. I haven't written the book to be interesting food for people's thinking. I've written it to point them to being able to discover who they are as formless presence. And, we could give some words to that to describe it, but it's a thing I need to be very cautious about. I can say that it's peace-filled. It's kind of joyful, or it's a contentment, and it's the essence of love, which is the essence of me and the essence of the world that we live in. But these are dangerous things to do, to use those words, because immediately the mind grabs hold of them and says, and then it goes into all sorts of definitions and contra points of view about love or about peace or about joy or whatever. and straight away people have lost it, And so the book shows people. And I hope that you've seen this as you read the book too. This is why I felt I wanted to write the book, and I feel that I was able to, largely out of intuitive inspiration. You might remember I mentioned in the preface that a year before I wrote this book, I tried to write it.
Yeah.
And I put some words on bits of paper around the table, and I thought these could be the different chapters of what I want to say.
Yeah.
And it just wouldn't happen, nothing would flow. And so, but a year later, I came across something that I thought was a bit lame, and I thought, I've got to write this book, And I thought, maybe it's not time yet. Maybe I'm still not ready, And I got all sorts of messages and several dreams and so forth that said, no, write it now. Now's the time to write it. And it just flowed. It just came out of me. And I would go for a walk. Most days I like to go for a long walk for exercise. But during this time, half the times I was out for a walk, I made a shortcut to get back home quickly because I had 3 or 4 ideas that had popped into my mind while I was out, and I didn't want to lose them. So I kind of raced back home to scribble them down and then began writing again. It just came. I'm not quite sure how I got onto that point, but you were asking me about my experiences of spirituality. Well, this was one aspect of that, and how I came to write the book. And yes, I did have a few months before I felt it was time to write the book. I had many, many, many dreams, a flood of dreams in that year about my spiritual awakening and about how this was going to help many, many people in the world. I had dreams about helping other people to wake up spiritually. And one of those dreams, the one that you alluded to about being in a theatre, I was in the auditorium, the audience part of a theatre. Nobody else was there, except for there were half a dozen little groups of 2 or 3 people. They were all men. In fact, in the dream, I don't remember the physical view of these people, but I heard one after another 5 or 6 groups of 2 or 3 male voices singing, "Who are you?" in regards to me. And they were heavenly, divine harmonies. No musical accompaniment, a cappella, I think they say. And it was a beautiful dream. And at the end of that dream, I woke up and I had energy flowing in my body and shaking my body intermittently for about half an hour. And so this was some sort of a milestone, I suppose I could say, in terms of me progressively seeing through the prejudice I had about who I was and about my experience in the world and about what the nature of the world. But there's some people become well known for rather extraordinary experiences that they have, and there's a tendency, and I think it's a very risky one, for people to think that those kinds of experiences are what spirituality is about or what spiritual awakening is about. And they're not. Spiritual awakening is not about having a flashy experience.
Yeah.
It's about almost the reverse. It's about becoming still and content and peacefully aware, and then increasingly being able to carry that into activity. And also a very core thing about, and this is one of the key benefits for your listeners, thinking in terms of why would I read a book about spiritual awakening made easy, made simple? Not necessarily always easy, but it's simple. And the benefit is that you begin to be able to see through everything that's kind of false about yourself or fabricated about yourself. But also you begin to be able to increasingly see clearly through everything that's false about the world and about other people, not in a judgmental way, but you'd be able to see what's real and what's not real anymore. And this is a treasure of an awakening benefit, that we can live in the world no longer kind of deluded by or manipulated by our experiences, other people, and the world around us.
I like that. It's making me, every time you say something, it actually makes me think a lot deeper into things. Andrew, how long did it take you to actually write this book?
Well, I finished the first draft in about 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
I was writing pretty much, yes, I was writing pretty much, each day solidly. Wow. And 3 weeks. Now, aspects of the book come from, things that I've investigated in the past, things I've learned about, read about, and so forth. So it's a bit misleading to say, yes, I wrote it in 3 weeks and it all came out of nothingness. No, I was pulling together much of what I'd, experienced in my life and realised in my life and so forth. But as I say, what enabled me to kind of pull it together was what I would just describe as a kind of an intuitive inspiration that allowed it to kind of flow and me to pull together what I'd come to experience and understand, plus some additional things that came in the moment of doing that. But yeah, so the first draft only took me about 3 weeks, and then I spent 4 or 5 months refining it, going through it over and over again and, editing it.
There's something that you talk about, Andrew. I put all my bullet points in front of me. You said you might have a memory of being happy at 10, unpopular at 15, uncertain about finding a partner at 20, not as financially well off as you would have liked to be at 30, and wanting to get a divorce at 40. I think a lot of this part actually
Don't forget the part I put in. Don't forget the part I put in brackets at the end of that, just to name some not uncommon examples.
Yeah, no, you did. You did say that. You did. You did say that. But it's funny because I know a lot of people who actually do think like this. And for you to pull it in a book means that you have been aware and you've even seen it yourself, or you could be going through it yourself at some point in your life where this was relevant And I feel like this is relevant to a lot
Savia,
of people.
I'm really glad that you mentioned this little part of the book, because probably all of your listeners can relate to that. If they look back on their life when they were a little child, when they were 15, when they were 20, when they were 30, at each stage of their life, they've kind of felt like they were who they are. They were them. You know, when I look back at any stage of my life, I say, yes, I was me then. And everyone can kind of relate to that. And so even though the experiences were kind of all sort of different at those various stages of your life, and not only, you know, every 10 years, but every year, every month, you know, every day, okay, you had different emotions, you had different thoughts going on, you had different experiences happening in your day-to-day activity, you had different relationships. When you became an adult, you might have had different jobs. You might have had a job 10 years and then changed to become something else different for another 10 years. So, but during all that time, you always kind of felt like you were you. And that is you. So if I was to say, you know, I've spent 30 years becoming a teacher and working as a teacher, or I've spent 30 years studying to become and now practicing as a doctor or as a carpenter or as a this. I'm a carpenter, I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher. No, you're not, because you were you before you ever did that training, right? And then if you decide to change your job or the economy goes into fits and starts like it's currently doing, and you almost are forced to get a different job, and you're no longer a doctor, or you're no longer an airline pilot, or you're not ceasing to be you. So airline pilot or doctor or carpenter or teacher were activities that you engaged in, but they were never who you are, because you were who you are before you did them, while you did them, after you did them. And I'm glad you mentioned this, because it does give people something they can really relate to, that's not weird and esoteric and everything. That's who they truly are. Yeah. That awareness that's always been, often very dimly, but it's always kind of been in the background. And reading my book, Spiritual Awakening Made Simple, and doing the things that I suggest people consider and try out, they'll more and more come back into touch with this sense of their own beingness. That is that's where their contentment and their lack of confusion and their lack of frustration lie, coming back to they are the observing awareness, noticing their thoughts happening, noticing their activity happening, noticing their perceptions taking place. But they're not those things. They're the observer, the noticer of all of that.
I love that. There's also a piece that you wrote, and it says, all things that truly matter to humans arise from the stable depth of life. And I thought that was a beautiful sentence. Can you tell us a little bit more about that particular sentence and why you wrote it?
We talked earlier about how when we're a baby and a child, we kind of our attention gets drawn out from our inner beingness to the world. And we see ourselves as being this body and this kind of person and a member of this kind of family. And, you know, we start to identify with concepts about the world and with things and people in the world of form. When I say we identify with them, we think that they're part of who we are or essential to who we are. And we get drawn into this mistaken assumption that to find happiness in this world, I need to experience certain things. I need to have certain kinds of relationships. I need to be able to buy and possess certain things.
Yeah.
So, you know, but what many people who've been around for a while have realised, and hopefully many young people begin to notice quite soon, somehow those things never are fulfilling.
That's true.
They do bring you a sense of satisfaction for a short time. But part of that reason that they do is because if I, for example, am a child and I'm thinking, oh, I wish I had a bike, I wish I had a bicycle. Oh, Mum and Dad, can't you please buy me a bicycle? And eventually, 2 years later, for Christmas, I get a bicycle. And I'm overjoyed. It makes me feel so glad that I've got a bicycle. And for the next few weeks, I hardly do anything but except ride my bicycle around the place. But before very long, I'm starting to think about some other thing. I need something else to satisfy me.
Yeah.
Some other little goal comes to my mind, or some other little thing, possession that I want, or some other little concern I want to resolve. Now, what gave me the sense of satisfaction when I finally got my bicycle was really that the thought, I wish I had a bicycle, but I haven't got one, is no longer there.
Yeah.
So this thought that's been kind of haunting me, I want a bicycle, I'd be happy if I had a bicycle, and then suddenly, I've got a bicycle, and suddenly the thought that's been running around my head, it's got no point in running around my head anymore, and so my mind comes back into stillness. And that's really the satisfaction we temporarily get from getting the things in the world of form that we want. Now, don't take this too extreme. Of course, we need to buy enough food to eat, and we need to have a shelter and a house to live in. Of course, we need to go out and get those things. But by and large, what keeps people frustrated or discontent much of their life, many people all of their lives, is that they, one after another, put up these things that they think, if I can achieve this, then I'll be happy. Yeah. Then I'll be finally content, But they don't ever fulfill. Yeah. And there's a reason why they can't fulfill, because they're not who we truly are. And the only thing that can truly fulfill us, the only thing that can truly bring us peace, is to come back to who we truly are, to come back wakefully, come back into this aware presence in the moment. And that is contentment. That is peace. And as I said really way earlier on, and you've said, well, why do we think, what is it then about, why do I say that it's the subtle depths of life where all the things that we really want come from? Well, it's in the subtle depths of life that really the essence of love resides. The essence of beauty is in there. Intuition and creativity come from this depths of our consciousness, not from our mind. Our mind works with all sorts of ideas and things that might come up from the depths of our consciousness, intuitions and ideas and so forth. But the mind doesn't generate those. They come from the depths of life, from the depths of formless awareness, playfulness, joyfulness. These things are qualities of the awareness, they're qualities of life, and the essence of who I am, and the essence of you, who you are, Savia, and the essence of who each listener right now to this program is presence, awareness, formless awareness. And as they find out how to see through the things that are drawing their attention constantly away from who they truly are, ideas, for example, about who they are, whether they're good ideas about who they are or bad ideas of who they are, or just aspirations to achieve certain things in the world, or to get certain things, or to have a certain kind of a relationship. These things draw their attention away from who they truly are.
Yeah.
It's not that they should never do these things, but when they are able to do them without losing who they without kind of losing their connection. Even connection is kind of like the wrong word, because it's not a connection to who you are. You are that.
You're that person.
Well, without being drawn away from the awareness that you are, the formless awareness, then you can have all of that while you participate in the world. And then your participation in the world becomes something beautiful, because it comes to express the beauty, the love, the joy, the playfulness that are all aspects or qualities of this essence of life that we are, this consciousness that lies beyond our thinking mind, beyond our emotions. I hope you'll ask me about emotions in a minute.
You know I am.
And beyond my physical body.
So, see, now you said it. I was going to go into another one, but now you've talked about I love talking about emotions, because emotions are something that is so stimulating to me when people talk about them. It's a big factor of who we are. So from your point of view, let's talk about emotions. How do you feel emotions tell us who we are as a person? And how do you feel your emotions tell you who you are as a person? And how does that connect all together with everything else in the world?
Well, in a minute, I'm going to, maybe if I remember back to it, I'm going to make a distinction a bit between feelings and emotions. But initially, broadly speaking, what I want to say to your listeners is that none of their feelings or emotions are who they are. For a moment, I'd like to talk about emotions that we might find troubling. I would say not all, but most of what we find troubling is emotions that are triggered by thoughts. There are subtler things that we might say are feelings, and this is they begin to connect more with notions of, of intuition or inner awareness. So I sort of kind of see them a little bit differently. For example, I've been talking about, the essence of who you are when you're really present and not caught up in identifying with thoughts and objects and your body and so forth. It's experienced as a peacefulness. Yeah. You could say that's a kind of a peaceful feeling. You could say that. It's a little bit risky to say I'm experiencing this feeling, because then there becomes a difference between you and the feeling.
True.
But this experience of your own beingness feels nice, but it feels nice in the sense of this is me, rather than feeling nice as in here's me experiencing this nice thing. I can put it like that. But now I just want to say a few words about how most of us experience emotions, which is that they're a little bit troublesome. The first thing I would like your listeners to hear about emotions is that it's not what we experience or who we are that ever triggers our troubling emotions. It's almost universally accepted that I'm churned up emotionally because of something that somebody has said to me, or something that I've seen out in the world today, or something I experienced at work. This has happened to me. I feel all churned up emotionally. This emotion, I feel sadness, I feel grief, I feel whatever it might be. But no. What triggers our troubling emotions is when we have a thought that says that something I've perceived or am experiencing, or something that's in my thinking, some concept about me or another person, if I think that if this thought comes up that person or that situation or that idea is bad, and I believe the thought, then troubling emotions are triggered. So it's not what we experience that troubles us. It's having and believing a thought that what I've experienced is bad. Now, if we look at the thought that's triggered our emotion, first of all, like I said, we might think that I'm feeling this way because of what's happened. But if we can go beyond that automatic conditioned response to say, well, yes, of course I'm angry because he did this or something like that. But instead of going straight to the experience or the person as being what caused the emotion, if we can say, okay, there's this emotion, this has just happened. What thought am I having about what's just happened that's triggering my emotion? I'm having this thought, what that person said was wrong, was nasty, or was bad, or what I saw just happen, or even what I just did is bad. Then the emotions flood in, anger or guilt or sadness or regret, all those things. And yet it's not what happened that triggered those emotions. It's believing the thought that what you observed or what you experienced was bad. Now, when we look at and the book shows, doesn't it, Savia? It shows that it's quite simple for us to look at the thought that's triggered our negative emotion or troubling emotion, ask ourselves if there's any way that we can know for certain that thought is true. And we soon discover that actually there's no way that I can know for certain that it's true. There's no way that I can know that all the consequences, for example, of what's just happened are going to be bad. And there's the little prompter in there, well, is it possible to imagine some possible good thing that might come out of what you just saw happen?
Yeah.
Well, yes, I guess so. It is possible that it could lead to this and this, yes. And without going too much into it here, it's easy for the reader to discover for themselves that the thought that something is bad I can't know that that's true, that it's bad. And when they see that, the troubling emotion, and what's left? Peace. Because what's left is you, the awareness, without the turbulent thought that you were previously, a few moments ago, identifying with. So you're back to wakeful presence, peace, contentment. It's a beautiful and simple principle to apply to help people deal with big things as they come and go, but also little things throughout each day, the little things that sometimes throw us, and then we get, a little bit annoyed about this, or a bit frustrated about that, or, I'm a bit disappointed about that. I was expecting something in the mail and it still hasn't come, and I feel so disappointed. Then you ask yourself, these questions, and you see, well, actually, no, I don't know for sure that it's bad. Could it lead to something good? Could it be good? Yes, it could. Yeah, blah, blah. and then, wow, this peacefulness of our own nature floods in again.
Yeah. There are a few of your chapters, when I was reading the titles of your chapters, your different chapters that you have, and I bullet pointed a few of them, and I wanted to talk about them, of why you called it this. So one of them was called Karma, which I want to talk about. I love hearing people's different perspectives of what karma is and what it means to them. So you wrote Karma, how you can create your life. You also wrote your vibe affects your surroundings, which is very true. Distracting yourself from your thoughts, and you're thinking positive thoughts, and the gift of suffering. That is definitely something I want to talk about. Can we go through?
that's a bucket full of things you've just
I know.
Raised there. but and it's great. It's great. Let's come back to that first one. But you gave a very slight misquote of that one about karma.
Karma.
Have you got it there in front of you?
Karma. How you can create your life.
Mistake. how you create your life.
Okay, see, there
Not
you
how you
go.
can, but we all the time, every one of us, we are creating our experience out of the patterns of energy and thinking and emotion that are dominant in our being.
Yeah.
Now, and that little subheading that you've quoted says how we create our life rather
Yeah.
than how we can create our life, because we don't have to try. We're doing it all the time.
Yeah.
Every one of us, since we were a baby, we are creating our life experience. The conditioning that we take on, that is to say, we begin to identify with certain things and certain concepts, certain ideas of who I am and about who other people are, and certain ideas about what I need to experience and what kind of person I am. And just to give a very simple example, somebody who grows up in a very poor family takes on, in almost every case, not absolutely universally, but in almost every case, they take on this assumption, they accept this concept that I'm a member of a poor family.
Yeah.
Maybe even to the extent of, who am I? I'm a poor person. Those people over there, they're rich people, but I'm more in this category. I'm a poor person. It's a simple example, right? But but somebody who grows up in a very prosperous family doesn't grow into the world and into their adulthood with this same strength of thought. Their dominant thought might be, no, everything works out pretty well, and usually at most times I can get the things that I want, and they have a different kind of programming happening. Now, that chapter lays out in what I think is a very clear way some of these mechanisms of how what we believe to be the case, we experience to be the case.
Yeah.
And you'll remember that I make the point several times. It's not that our experience confirms that our assumption about me, who I am, the kind of person I am, or about life. It's not that my experience confirms that idea I had is true. It's that my experience reflects the assumptions that I had about who I am. It's because what I'm experiencing in my life has been generated by, or I've somehow brought it about, or been drawn to those environments, or somehow, one way and another, I've created for myself a situation where I'm experiencing the things that reflect the dominant conditioning patterns that I experienced from childhood. It continues throughout life for most people, but predominantly in childhood. So karma is not the reward for good words and actions, or the punishment for bad words and bad actions, which some people think of, as being karma. Yeah. Karma is simply the phenomenon that our life experience reflects the patterns of conditioning that we experience since early childhood. So to have some different, I'd like my life to be different in various ways. Fine. So this book shows people how to identify some of the patterns of thinking, how to notice that there's no way that they can know for sure that it's true that those patterns of thinking are true. And when they dissolve those patterns of thinking in that very simple way, actually, they progressively cease to have their experience reflect those patterns of thinking. They become, I use the phrase in the book, something like, they crack wide open the karmic prison, which is simply our conditioned assumptions about ourselves. So, for example, I grew up in a poor family. I come to take on this idea, I'm a poor person. Life's always going to be a struggle for me. I'm never going to have most of the things that I'd really like to have. And then when we start to question that thought, well, have you ever gotten something that you would like to have? Well, yes. So the thought that I don't get the things that I want isn't true, because there have been times when you did get the things you want. Oh, yeah. So this is just a very little tiny taster, how we can begin to discover, actually, these patterns of things that I've been assuming to be true, I recognise that there's no way that I can know that they're true. And then we begin to be free of them, being free of identifying with thinking that those kind of thoughts are who we are. We experience ourselves as the inner energy or consciousness of life, and we begin to live our life free of the kind of constraints that this mechanism of karma, or just simply the mechanism of our conditioned patterns of thinking and behaviour, create certain kinds of experiences. And they cease to create those kinds of experiences when we stop believing them, when we stop identifying with them. We stop having this assumption that those things are true about me.
Oh, that's perfect.
Now I don't know if you want to interject something here, but you did say something about dealing with different ways of dealing with troubling thoughts. Is that something you want to go on to now, or do you want to come back to your next point that you had?
No, that's definitely. I also wanted to go on to, there is troubling thoughts, but there's also the gift of suffering. I wanted to understand that a bit more. Because
it's as simple as this. Oh, sorry, there's an ending part to your question. Do you want to complete it?
No. All it was yesterday I was talking to I spoke to a therapist, and she said, I don't know if you would agree, but she said to me, suffering is not something that we want as humans. But when I read in your book about suffering, I was a bit more intrigued to find out why you put that particular part in there. So if we could elaborate on that.
Well, I would agree with that therapist to this extent, at least, if they've said suffering is not something that human beings want. Sure, it's not. Almost by definition, it's something that we don't want. But that's how it can be a gift.
Yeah.
Here, because let's say I've got a conditioned pattern of thinking of myself as a certain kind of person. Let's say I've got a pattern of guilt. I always feel I'm not really good enough. People, sometimes I feel unworthy. Sometimes I do and say things I regret, and just somehow I'm not as good as I should be.
Yeah.
It's a pretty common, if not universal, pattern of emotion and thinking. Now, guilt is suffering. It's not fun, right?
That's true.
Feeling unworthy, feeling guilty, feeling shame for saying this or doing this, and everyone can look back on their life and either choose to, or sometimes without choosing to, it just happens all the time anyway, that that it pops up into their mind. Oh gosh, I remember 25 years ago I said such and such. So if we feel bad about something and we think, I regret doing that, I feel shame for doing that, I feel bad, I feel unworthy, it doesn't feel nice.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, because it doesn't feel nice, if you say to me, you're not enjoying that feeling, are you? Now, I can show you how you can get rid of that feeling and feel a lot more peaceful. I'll say, oh, great. Well, what? You mean how? How? Tell me. How can I get rid of this suffering feeling of emotion that sort of comes and goes in waves, and I just don't like it?
Yeah.
Now, so then I'm prompted by my suffering to say, okay, I'm willing to have a look at what's going on here. What is this pattern, perhaps, of my thinking, or my, of my experience that I need to look at and question. I'm damn over this feeling of feeling bad about myself, and I'm going to really look at it now. I'm going to say, really? Am I? And if so, what do I need to change? And damn it, I'll change it. So the suffering prompts us to want to change, to want to figure out what's false. That's a better way of putting it. I like that better.
Yeah.
Suffering prompts us to say, this is not right. I don't want this anymore. Something's false here. Let me have a look at what's false. And that is the gift in suffering. Because when we say to ourselves, well, damn it, I am willing now to have a look at and listen to what this person's saying, or what this book is saying, or what's false here that I could perhaps have a look at. And if it ends this nightmare of feeling bad about myself, I'll be very glad to have a look at it and just see if it makes sense to me, and if it actually does resolve this feeling. Now, if I've got a feeling that I'm unworthy or bad, but if in order for my ego, or my conceptual sense of self, in order for my ego to survive, I've kind of buried it under all sorts of false notions about, oh, I'm so good at this, I'm so good at that, I'm blah, 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 blah. So in other words, if we kind of get into this pretense of being a good person, or of being a happy person, and there are a lot of people, in order just for their ego to survive, they've kind of built up this false notion of, I'm a good person. Look, I do this, I do that. Blah, blah, blah. But so it can seem then, it can be a way of masking their suffering.
Okay.
Now, so if they're not suffering, you say, okay, my life's not perfect, but I'm pretty okay, thanks very much. So if this person's kind of feels like, I'm not really that unhappy, no, everything's okay. They are not being offered, they're not seeing this gift in the turmoil that actually is underneath the surface. If they felt bad, some straw that breaks the camel's back experience happened, and they finally say, damn it, my life is a mess. Yes, it is, and I feel terrible. Then they're open.
Yeah.
They're open to say, well, damn it, what is going on here? What's false that's triggering all this? But if they haven't gone into that level of suffering, they're skimming along the surface of life, still, in a certain sense, kind of not wanting to look too deep, and just sort of kind of pretending along to be a pretty happy person, pretty good person, blah, blah, blah.
No, that's true. That's definitely true. Here's a question for you, Andrew. I want to ask you this one to help aspiring writers. Like, you've been doing this for many years, so your experience would be so valuable to other writers who are just starting. What would you say to other writers who are starting to write a similar type of book that you have written? What would you say to them to inspire them to continue to write?
It's a really good question. I want to link it to a phrase that's talked about a lot in the world at the moment, and that is, I'm struggling now to get the exact words, but that is to do with, manifesting what we want. The phrase is the law of manifestation, or the law of attraction, sometimes called. Now, the law of attraction is nothing other than karma, what we were just talking about. What comes into our life, we don't have to try. Things that are coming into our life, our experience is reflecting. We will continue to reflect until we change. It reflects the patterns of thinking and behaving and patterns of emotion. This is the self-fulfilling prophecy. What we expect is what we experience. Now, here's the trick. The thing that is so seldom noticed about the law of attraction and about aspiring to become anything, be it a writer or anything. And this is the thing. Who is wanting that thing? Is it something that's in you that just keeps bubbling up and wants to be expressed in the world? In other words, is it coming out of your authentic self, bubbling up as intuition, as creativity, wanting to burst out into the world? Or is it something that's coming from your idea of you, your idea of who you would like to be? Because many egos would like to think, when I use the word ego, I want to clarify, I clarified in the book, but I want to clarify it here. I'm not using the word ego to mean the people who are up themselves. They think they're just the greatest thing in the world. No. An ego, we all grow up with an ego until maybe we dissolve it. Yes. We all grow up human beings because it's this sense of me as a separate person from you and everybody else. It's my conceptual idea of who I am. It's my self-image. It's my idea of me. This is my ego. Now, if the ego, this conceptual sense of who I am, says, wow, wouldn't it be cool to be an author? Wouldn't it be cool, wouldn't it be cool to be a best-selling author? You know, I want to write poetry, or I want to write mystery stories, or I want to write about how people can be happy. It may be that this aspiration is driven primarily from the ego wanting to add something that everyone regards as good to their sense of who they are. Now, if that's the thing driving it, you're going to have your difficulties. You're going to have your difficulty. You may break through and to some extent and even maybe completely achieve that goal.
Yeah.
But here's the difference. If it's been coming, if the aspiration has all the time really been driven by the ego, you may achieve it, but you won't find it fulfilling. Whereas if it comes from who you truly are and just wants to bubble out and be your expression of your essence into the world, the process and the outcome will be satisfying. So my advice, to come right back to your original question, to an aspiring author is to read my book, Spiritual Awakening Made Simple. That's my advice, and to read it many times. And in the book, you'll know. I think you've probably come to that point, or so you haven't quite got to the end. It's very near the end where I say, look, it's certainly an option for you to having read this book, put it on your shelf and say, well, that was interesting, and that's the end of it. Or maybe take one or two little things that I've suggested people could do and just do that and never bother read the book again. But I've suggested that if you really want to have this awakening happen in your life to the essence of who you truly are, read the book over and over, because every time you'll see things you didn't see the previous time.
That's true.
More and more things, and not just see them, and not just see them conceptually, but you will unravel layer upon layer of the blankets that have been laid over the top of you that have been putting you to sleep. So anyway, to aspiring authors, I would say, do what you can to become the authentic you. Because as you do, the creativity that will flow from the essence of who you are is the same, because the essence of who you are is the essence of the universal intelligence that runs all of this whole life, all of the universe. This consciousness is the one and the same thing. So as you become more and more put aside the conditioning, the book shows quite straightforward, quite simple terms. It shows how you can begin to progressively do this. Then you will hardly be able to stop the flow of your writing, because what wants to write will be you / life. Life will flow through you to write those books or whatever it might be. But if you decide, no, I don't want to do that, I just want to keep on, well, go for it, do what you feel drawn to do. But if you're labouring to be creative under a layer of conditioning, it's going to be a struggle. And what you write won't be as satisfying to you or to any other person as it would be if it flowed from the depths of you. Now, there is a possibility that you need to consider that if I just, in a way, put aside for the moment my mental drivingness, to be a writer, and I work to become more authentically who I am, the possibility exists that you might find that the way the essence of you really wants to express in the world might be something different. It might be being a dancer.
True.
Or it might be being a podcast host. Or it might be being, any one of a number of other things that you had perhaps, sensed from time to time. You kind of, there's that could be there, but no, it's cooler to be a writer. That may happen. I'm not saying it will. It may well be that indeed the writer is the right thing for you. But if you temporarily just take your foot off the pedal a little bit and work instead on getting in touch with the essence of who you are and allow life to flow through you without the distorting filters of perception, of emotion, of every other kind, then that creativity can flow beautifully through your writing.
See? I have one more question for you, Andrew, before we have to go. Please tell us where we can find your book. When is it out? All your social media, so we can get in contact with you. Please share it with us.
Well, thank you. My book is going to be available as a paperback and as an ebook from the 1st of August. People can get it from Amazon or from most of the other main, online bookstores. It'll also be in many physical bookstores. So it'll be readily available. I have a website. I invite people to visit me on my website, awakeningmadesimple.org. Hasn't got the spiritual word in the front. awakeningmadesimple.org. And on the contacts page of my website, there are some different social media things if people want to connect with me in that way. But I also want to let people know I also have a newsletter that people are able to subscribe to, and it'll tell of different events that maybe I'll be participating in as things unfold. But I also am going to be offering one-on-one online support for people, counselling support, especially for people who've read my book, are continuing to read my book, and feeling that it would be nice just to have a bit more guidance on this point or that point, or I'm going through these series of bumps along the way. I wish I could talk with somebody. Savia, so many times wished I had somebody I could talk with as I went through all of this myself.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anybody. One or two minor exceptions, but no, I had to basically go through it and find my own way through it. It's not necessarily that it's arduous, but there will be bumps. The ego will from time to time say, hey, I don't want to be put aside like you're trying to do here. I'm going to throw up this thought, blah, blah, this situation, and I'm going to try and entice you back into how things used to be. That were good old days, So the ego will kind of say this a little bit. And so many people will find from time to time it would be nice just to have a little bit of support. And so I want to offer that to other people that I didn't find was available to me.
That's really nice, Andrew, for you to actually do that. I think that's one of the reasons why I also do the podcast, to give people a platform for them to share what they do. And Andrew, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Ask People podcast and sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your kindness, and of course, your book. And thank you for giving me a copy of the book. I've enjoyed reading it and will continue to read it. He gave me a thumbs up, guys. So, Andrew, I want to thank you so much again for coming on the Ask People podcast. Guys, thank you so much for listening, as always, to the Ask People podcast. And please remember, you can subscribe to Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and any other platform that you prefer to listen to. Please also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also donate to the Ask People podcast so we can continue to speak to lovely people like Andrew, who shared all his knowledge with us today. All you need to do is go onto the Savia Rocks website, or you can simply go onto paypal.me/Us People podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Stay happy, stay positive, and as always, please continue to be kind to one another.